Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. We're headed into Week 14, so we have our Thursday night football game with Dallas and Detroit, so let's get into the numbers. Starting off with the team data, you have Detroit favored on the money line with a spread of 3 points and a total line of 54.5. There's your team seasonal averages, and then looking at their rankings, as before we've seen with Dallas, they're pretty good offensively with a scoring rank of 2, best team in the league for passing, and about an average rushing rank. Defensively, they're much worse with an allowed scoring rank of 31, allowed passing rank of 32, and allowed rushing rank of 20. With Detroit, they also have a pretty good offense with a scoring rank of 4, passing rank of 8, and a rushing rank of 4. And defensively, they're much closer to average with an allowed scoring rank of 15, allowed passing rank of 19, and allowed rushing rank of 11. And then getting into the quarterbacks, you have Dak Prescott and Jared Goff, with Prescott averaging 20.1 fantasy points per game, and Jared Goff averaging 17.6. There's your player seasonal averages if you need them. But then for their turnovers, you have Dak Prescott with 8 interceptions and 1 fumble lost due to a sack. And for Jared Goff, you have 5 interceptions and 2 fumbles lost due to a sack. For how they impact the rushing game, you have Dak Prescott with 13.4% of the team's rushing carry share and 8.3% of the team's rushing yard share, and Goff with even less, which unfortunately doesn't show up here, but it's probably about 8% and maybe about 5%. Next up with your running backs, you have Javonte Williams and Jamar Gibbs, with Williams averaging 16.3 fantasy points per game and Gibbs averaging 22.5, flipped over to their season averages. And then for their turnovers, you get Javonte Williams with 1 rushing fumble and 1 receiving fumble this season, and Gibbs has no turnovers. And then looking at their carry and rush share, you get Javonte Williams with 64.7% of the team's rushing carry share and 67.2% of the team's rushing yard share. That, of course, is the largest of anybody else, and you can see how it's broken down with a few other people, but mostly either going to Prescott or Williams. And for Gibbs, you get 56.3% of the team's rushing carry share and 63.3% of the team's rushing yard share. Of course, we know the next biggest counterpart is David Montgomery, so we'll just take a quick look at him too, with him averaging 10.8 fantasy points per game. Along with his season averages if you need that information, go ahead and give a pause. And then same with his chart information, with 39.5% of the team's rushing carry share and 33.8% of the team's rushing yard share. We can also quickly go back and see that Goff's numbers were 4.2% of the team's rushing carry share and 2.9% of the team's rushing yard share. For your receivers, you have CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown. CeeDee Lamb averages almost 18 fantasy points per game, and Amon-Ra just a little ahead of that with 18.2. And then once again, your season averages, and we don't need to worry about turnovers because neither receiver has given up any turnovers this season. For their share, you get CeeDee Lamb with almost 19.8% of the team's target share and almost 23% of the team's rushing yard share. For Amon-Ra St. Brown, he gets 31.4% of the team's target share and 30.6% of the team's receiving yard share. This is the largest on the team for Amon-Ra St. Brown, but that can't be said the same for CeeDee Lamb on Dallas. And on Dallas, that's because of our number 2 receiver with George Pickens at an average of 19.8 fantasy points per game. And then Williams as the number 2 receiver over here with 12.1 fantasy points per game. And then with your season averages, with the turnovers, we have none actually given up. Even though Pickens has dropped the ball 3 times for receiving fumbles, he actually has not lost them. And then looking at your share, you get George Pickens with about 25.6% of the team's target share and 35.3% of the team's receiving yard share, which does give him the largest percentage of anybody else on the team. Now CeeDee Lamb was out, so he's still building up his portion from what he had before. So I think he's slowly catching Pickens, but Pickens is still getting quite a bit of production. As we can see here too, with the charts, where he gets more receiving yards than anybody else on the team as of late. With Williams, he gets about 18.3% of the team's target share and 24.5% of the receiving yard share. Finally, with your tight ends, you have Jake Ferguson, and because we have Brock Wright listed as out, you have Ross Dwelley, with Ross not even getting an average of 1 fantasy point per game, since he hasn't played very much. I'll move to their season averages, even though that doesn't make sense for Ross very much. And of course, with so few games, he has no turnovers, but with Jake Ferguson, he has 1 receiving fumble this season. And then for share, you get Jake Ferguson with about 20.2% of the team's target share. That only equates, though, to about 15.3% of the team's receiving yard share. And Ross is so new that we don't even have numbers for him yet on the Lions. So there's all the data for this game. If we look at this matchup, it does seem like it could be a very interesting one with a very it seems like it could be an interesting one with a it does seem like it could be an interesting one with a great offense over here on Dallas. Really good passing rank, really good scoring rank. They do need some work on their rushing rank, but pretty good overall. And that's going against about an average defense with an allowed scoring rank of 15, so that 2 against that 15 should be pretty good for Dallas. However, their defense is quite bad against a pretty good offense, and Detroit actually has the advantage across the board here. So even though they both have advantages against each other's defense, I think that Detroit has the bigger advantage against a worse defense, giving them the advantage at home as well. So based on the numbers, I think that Detroit ends up taking this game. So there you have it. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment on what other data you want to see in the future. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the Sunday games.